First, I want to thank Vito Schnabel for inviting me to have a conversation with Francesco Clemente. And it's a strange thing for me because I never thought I would meet you. I never met you. I never thought I would meet you. But then it's one of the wonderful things for me that if I keep on painting, my paintings bring me everything. It's, I always say thank you paintings for everything I have. And so it was just so flattering. And then I want to thank everybody who drove from the east side to here. About an hour, a little bit more. That was my regular commute when I worked at the Santa Monica Museum. And I want to thank everybody who drove down from the hills, from Malibu, from wherever you drove from. But what a wonderful morning. What a wonderful morning to come to Santa Monica where it's kind of chilly and foggy. And then to get out of ourselves into like this beautiful, incredibly enormous exhibition. And what a beautiful space. And so I just wanted to say that to begin with. And so what I was thinking was about when I first started seeing your paintings in New York, and I was, as far as I can remember, I think maybe 17, 18 years old. And I was at Princeton University, and what I'm not sure that everyone in the audience realizes, but a lot of people do, is the impact that your painting had at the time. It was like, you know, like a drop of dye in the water that it wasn't like an explosion, but it just was like a drop of color that then just permeated everything. That there was really no turning back. And what I mean about that was that in New York, if I saw another Flavin show, now I love Flavin's work, but there was a Castelli Flavin show, and then there was a Judd show, and then there was I worked for Paula Cooper, then there was an Andre show, and then came the Italians and the Germans, and the thing was, when I dressed up in the suits, Francesco Clemente, he wears a very nice suit to the opening. It changed everything. We didn't know what to do. Should we get dressed up? Should we not?
It was my father's suit.
So I want to ask you about coming to New York and wearing a suit as a very young man.
Well, the suit belonged to my father from the 1950s. My coming to New York happened in a very curious way, because I did not come to New York from Italy. I think if I'd come to New York from Italy, I would have been too weak to survive. But I came from India. I was living in India, and in pre-digital days, I received by letter 3 invitations to show in New York City, and 1 invitation to make prints in San Francisco. And the printmaker in San Francisco sent me a ticket via Japan to go from India to Japan to California.
Crown Point Press.
Crown Point Press.
Crown Point Press.
And she sent me a map of Kamakura, and I arrived to Japan from India and went to stay in a temple in Kamakura, and then from there to California. So I came to America from here.
So wait a minute, so Crown Point Press brought you from India to Japan.
Yes.
And then you made those beautiful...
Those I made later, the woodcuts that I made in Japan, I made them later. But here...
But up at Crown Point Press, just parenthetically, I was there, and it's impossible to make an etching. And yours are the best ones there. I just, look, how can this man do this? It's incredible.
Well...
The etchings there.
Because I don't have an academic training, I am forced to make everything up. Basically, I saw myself at the beginning when I started to paint one of my best friends, when if we go back before this, when I moved from my native place, Naples, to 200 miles north of Naples, Rome, and I became friends with two artists who was also I moved to Rome. And one was Boetti, who was very important in making me into an artist. And the other one was Ontani, who was this performance artist who was impersonating great classic paintings from the past. And so I thought, well, if you can impersonate the paintings, I can impersonate the painters. So I'm going to just act as a painter and something will come out of it. So that's how I really started to paint. So
you go to Rome when you left Naples when you're maybe 17 or 19?
19.
So you finished what was high school there?
I finished high school.
And when you were in high school, what were you thinking you were going to do? Architecture, right?
I went to Rome to study architecture, but then I did everything except the last exam. I didn't want to graduate at the end.
So architecture in the 70s in Italy,
it was the hotbed of what then was going to become a terrorist movement. That's what we did at university, was to discuss how to destroy the capitalist system.
Yeah.
And many professors got shot, actually. I didn't shoot anybody, but I knew somebody who was doing that. Yeah, in the legs.
It's serious, yeah. So you go to Rome, you're an architecture student at where?
In the University Faculty of Architecture.
And then how do you meet, what is Boetti's first name?
Alighiero.
Alighiero. What do you call him, Alighiero?
Alighiero, yes. Alighiero was an artist who belonged to the arte povera movement, but he was a little bit of an underdog. That was a very ideologically charged movement. It was the last one like that, where you really had very strong opinions about what you were allowed to do, what you were not allowed to do. And Boetti, everything he was doing, he was not allowed to do it. This was all bad, what he was doing. But somehow he was included in those exhibitions. I think on the basis of the early work and the fact that there was process involved. But then from them he had moved to making embroidery in Afghanistan, and so the work was very seductive, very colorful, everything that arte povera thought was not very allowed.
Which comes up in your...
Basically, my education was this artist from the arte povera, with hardcore education because they were brutal. But that was good.
Did you have a studio? Did you have a studio?
Marisa Merz, Boetti, Cunellis, all those people.
Were they mostly in Rome?
Well, that's the other thing, that Italy is very campanilistic, so the artist in Turin hated the artist in Milan, the artist in Rome hated the artist in Turin. It was just one giant battle all the time.
Like it always has been.
Yes.
Yeah, with this sort of arte povera city-states. Yeah.
Basically, the orthodox arte povera was in Turin. But somehow those artists were the ones who survived today.
Who was living in Turin?
Anselmo, Penone, and Zorio. But the other artists, they thought this were really light.
Okay, so, and then who's in Rome? Who's in Rome?
Cunellis was in Rome.
Okay.
Cunellis was in Rome, Pietro Pisani was in Rome, and then Boetti was in Rome. Boetti made fun of me because he thought that if you go south, you go toward liberty and freedom. If you go north, you are going after your ambition. So he thought that he had come from Turin because he wanted to be free, and then come from the south because I wanted to get something. But we became friends anyway. My connection to America, if you think of it, because everything we're talking about is America. This is America. Krishnamurti, your Episcopal Father, the spiritual desire of this community, this is all very attractive to me. So, but basically, I now got completely lost about why we got here, except for the fact that, yes, that I was living in the original place where the story of Krishnamurti developed, and the story of Krishnamurti developed between India and America. And the way of thinking of Krishnamurti, who after the tragedy that Mary described, gave a famous speech which broke the heart, because basically the Theosophical movement wanted to build a new religion, and Krishnamurti destroyed their dream because he said truth is a pathless land. There is no path to truth. You can only reach truth in the moment. And this was a very radical message at the time. Radical, interestingly enough, radical for a Western audience and for an Eastern audience, because he broke all of the, very radical for an Eastern audience, which is very much rooted into very formalized spiritual contemplative practices, and he just broke that mold, and he went on talking about it in as spontaneous a way as he was capable of for many years. And it definitely, for me to see him, he would come back to Madras in later years and speak. He would refuse to enter the compound of the Theosophical Society, because this was to him the enemy. And he would be in another compound nearby. And I was very, very young enough that many of the people who were part of the story, the gentleman who had taken the ship to take the children, Krishnamurti and his brother, to England, he was still alive. He was almost 100 years old. And they were just going around with his bicycle in this compound. So I met some of these people, and they were very, very, very eccentric people, because the episode that I recounted of seeing the aura of this child, they were seeing everyone's aura. I mean, they would meet me and say, they would meet my wife and say, your aura is beautiful, white and pink, and then they would see my aura and say, oh, your aura is terrible, orange and green, it's only lust and anger. And they were only talking about things like this. And the main character on the compound was a bishop of a Theosophical church whose aura I was very jealous of, from my miserable green and orange. He had a white aura with the blue Maltese cross in the middle. I thought that was so chic.
Okay, so
I don't think I know it till now, 50 years later. There's no white, no blue.
So, okay. All right, I want you to, because this is very interesting. I don't know if people written about this, but the business with the auras.
Well,
this is important because the first,
try to go back
colors,
to painting and like
red lips and even
to,
the horse out there with its intense
to
colors.
go back to try to ground ourselves a little bit back to where we are. This movement, they also published several books with visuals. So when they were talking about aura, there is a book called Thought Forms by the second generation theorist, Madame Besant, who claimed to be a reincarnation of Giordano Bruno. And she published this book about thought forms, which was one of the formative things that I saw that made me want to be a painter, basically.
So the earliest piece I've ever seen of yours, I saw it at it was a show in Rome at Maxi.
Oh.
And I saw this painting and I was so excited. It was not so big, maybe like this, and then it had little heads, tiny. Do you know what painting this is? Little, come on.
Yes.
Little heads.
Yes.
You remember you painted?
Yes.
Okay. So when I saw it, I thought, oh, this is what I'm interested in, which is continually, which kind of hooks into the Theosophic business, is the self in relation to everything else. And when I saw these little heads, I thought, and then it was always, you know, the very, very famous painting you've made with the self-portrait, where there's the self-portrait in the eyes and then the self-portrait in the mouth. And it's a kind of down and down and down and down of the self, and the self eating the self, and the self seeing the self. And it's a kind of a snake eating its tail of self. And so this is an observation. I don't know what the question would be here, but I almost think it's like the self-portraits are very different than, I'm trying to think of like other self-portraiture. Well, I brought up Gustin because I was looking at this painting out here with what I think looks like bed springs and the two hearts. I said, oh, this is your portrait of you and your wife in bed. Which one are you? But
I said, unfortunately, I'm both.
the hairy one and it's like a beautiful harlequin pattern. Now, where was I?
The relation between...
Oh, like your self-portraits. A kind of, you know, artist self-portrait that you think of as, you know, like, let's just say like Van Gogh with the ear cut off. It's so material, but, and maybe just by dint of the thin paint, your self-portraiture that occurs over and over is quite immaterial, almost like a disappearing and bleeding into the environment. What do you think about this idea?
This is definitely a goal, a hope in the making of the work, is that not just the self-portraits, but every image should be memorable, which simply means you should be able to remember it, ideally. But also should give a sense that the image is transitory, is not a dogmatic statement of saying, oh, I'm so spiritual, I see the spiritual world and the spiritual world looks like this. No, is, oh, the spiritual world exists, the world of the imagination exists, it can be helpful, but is not some kind of cardboard refuge where you can finally anchor yourself to something permanent.